Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Amma ba'd. Ayyuhal ikhwah, we continue in our studying of Al-Usool wa adillatuha, the three fundamental principles and their evidences, authored by Imam al-Mujaddid Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab ibn Sulaiman At-Tamimi rahimahullah rahmatan wasi'ah. And these three usul, they refer to the three questions in the grave. Man Rabbuk, who is your Lord? Wa man Nabiyyuk, who is your Prophet? Wa ma dinuka, and what is your religion? The author said, bil adillah, and that knowing these matters with their evidences. And in the previous lesson, we mentioned a number of ibadat, different types of ibadah. And we proved how each one of them is an act of ibadah, and therefore directing them to other than Allah is shirk and kufr. However, we also categorized the different types of that ibadah, and when it becomes worship and when it is not considered to be worship. So the author, he mentioned from yesterday the statement of Ibn Kathir, Al-Khaliq lihadhihi al-ashya huwa al-mustahiq lil-ibadah, that the one who created all of these things, i.e. the ayat and the makhluqat, he is the one who is deserving of al-ibadah, meaning Tawheed al-Rububiyyah yastalzim Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah. He said, وَأَنْوَاعُ الْعِبَادَةِ الَّتِي أَمَرَ اللَّهُ بِهَا, and the different ibadat which Allah ordered with, like al-Islam, wal-Iman, wal-Ihsan, and from it is al-Du'a, wal-Khawf, wal-Raja, wal-Tawakkul, wal-Raghba, wal-Rahba, wal-Khushu', wal-Khashya, wal-Inaba, wal-Isti'ana, wal-Isti'adha, wal-Istighatha, wal-Dhabh, wal-Nadhr, وغير ذلك من أنواع العبادة التي أمر الله بها كلها لله تعالى. These ibadat and the other various ibadat, all of them have to be for Allah alone. And if they are directed to other than Allah, it is shirk. And the evidence for this is the saying of Allah, وَأَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدَ لِلَّهِ فَلَا تَدْعُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا. The author rahimahullah said, فَمَنْ صَرَفَ مِنْهَا شَيْئًا لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ فَهُوَ مُشْرِكٌ كَافِرٌ. Whoever directs any one of these ibadat to other than Allah, he is a mushrik and a kafir. And the evidence of this is the saying of Allah, وَمَنْ يَدْعُ مَعَ اللَّهِ إِلَهًا آخَرَ لَا بُرْهَانَ لَهُ بِهِ فَإِنَّمَا حِسَابُهُ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِ إِنَّهُ لَا يُفْلِحُ الْكَافِرُونَ. So in this noble ayah, Allah subhanahu called those people who direct ibadah to other than Allah kafirun. He said, إِنَّهُ لَا يُفْلِحُ الْكَافِرُونَ. And then after this, the author began mentioning each ibadah individually, and mentioned an evidence for every single one of these ibadat. So he first mentioned ad-du'a. Naam. So ad-du'a, what are the two types of du'a? Or when we say du'a, we intend by this two meanings. Now what are the two meanings of the two types of du'a? No, du'a al-mas'ala and du'a al-ibadah. What is du'a al-ibadah? Yeah, meaning every act of ibadah is a dua. Every act of ibadah is a dua. So in this ayah, when Allah said, وَمَنْ يَدْعُ مَعَ اللَّهِ إِلَهًا آخَرَ, meaning مَنْ يَعْبُدُ إِلَهًا آخَرَ. نعم. And when Allah subhanahu said, وَأَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدَ لِلَّهِ فَلَا تَدْعُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدًا, meaning وَأَنَّ الْمَسَاجِدَ لِلَّهِ فَلَا تَعْبُدْ مَعَ اللَّهِ أَحَدٍ. So here the meaning of dua is general ibadah, because your salah is a form of dua. Why, if somebody said to you, why do you pray salah? You say, because I'm asking Allah for His mercy and forgiveness for my sins. And that shows your salah is an act of ibadah. Why do you fast Ramadan? I'm asking Allah for Jannah and fearing punishment. So it's a form of dua. The essence of it is a dua. So this is dua al-ibadah. Then the specific meaning of dua, which is intended here, is dua al-mas'ala. And what's the meaning of dua al-mas'ala? What's the meaning of dua al-mas'ala?
Asking Allah for requests.
Now, a request which you make. Oh Allah, give me. Oh Allah, save me. Oh Allah, cure me. Oh Allah, bestow upon me. These are requests which you are making. Naam, mas'ala or su'al. Mas'ala or su'al. And the word mas'ala is used in the hadith to refer to dua. The word mas'ala is used to refer to dua. We find it in the hadith. Like I mentioned, the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, after he taught the Sahaba the tashahhud, and after he taught them Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad to the end of As-Salat Ibrahimiyya, then he said, ثُمَّ لَا يَتَخَيَّرُ مِنَ الْمَسْأَلَةِ مَا يَشَاءُ. Then let a person choose any request which he wants to make. Meaning let a person make any dua which he wants to make. So the word mas'ala is used to refer to a dua. طيب. Dua al-mas'ala meaning making a request. When is it shirk and kufr to direct to other than Allah? Meaning, when is making a request to another human being, when does it become shirk and kufr?
Is it when it doesn't fulfill the 4 conditions?
Or even easier, firstly, فِيمَا لَا يَقْدِرُ عَلَيْهِ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Making a request to other than Allah in that which only Allah can fulfill. Now, making a request to other than Allah in that which only Allah can fulfill. Like asking for a child. We know only Allah subhanahu can give a child. So this is when requesting something from somebody else is kufr. طيب. When is it allowed to make a request to other people? When is it allowed? First of all, what's the evidence even that you can make a request or dua or mas'ala to other human beings? What's the evidence for this? It's easier than you think, and it's not a trick question. The life of the Prophet ﷺ, the life of the Sahaba. How many times did the Prophet ﷺ ask companions for favors and give and take? And the fact that this is the nature of Allah which Allah has created us upon. And other general ayat, which encourage us to help other people. Now, and give charity. The saying of Allah, wa ta'awanu ala al-birri wa taqwa, help each other, cooperate with each other upon piety and righteousness. And Surah Al-Ma'un, Allah said, wa yamna'un al-ma'un, and they prevent al-ma'un. And what is al-ma'un? Ma'un is simple examples of helping each other. So we're not talking about charity. And in the Mufassirun, when they explain Surah Al-Ma'un, وَيَمْنَعُونَ الْمَعُونَ, they give examples. Ibn Kathir, he said, for example, allowing someone to borrow your axe, or a dil, or lending your pot or utensil to somebody. Like for example, giving a lift to a person, helping a person carry his shopping. Simple daily tasks that we as a community should be helping each other with. This is the meaning of Al-Ma'un. Al-Mu'una comes from helping and aiding. But the meaning of al-ma'un, وَيَمْنَعُونَ al-ma'un, is simple avenues of helping each other. Like you say to a person, do you mind if I borrow a tool? Do you mind if you give me a lift? Do you mind if I go, you come with me to pick my brother up? This is al-ma'un. So the point is, these are simple evidences that permit us to request help from other than Allah. But when is it allowed to request help from other than Allah? But the 4 conditions, what are they?
حي حاضر قادر سبب.
Good. حي حاضر قادر سبب. The person who you are asking help from has to be firstly alive. So if a person seeks help from a dead person, shirk and kufr. Secondly, the person has to be hadir, present or reachable, meaning you're able to communicate to him. Reachable or present, whether it's in person or by email or by phone, etc. Like we ring the police or the authorities or the fire services. So if a person is alive but the sheikh is in Pakistan and you're here, is it allowed for you to ask him for help? No. because he's not hadir. The third condition, he has to be qadir. He has to have the ability to help you. Even if he's alive and he is present, then he has to have normally the ability to help you. And then after this, sabab. Now what does that mean? Sabab.
Believe in that the ultimate help is going from Allah, not from Allah.
Now, so firstly, that Allah has made that person a cause, meaning you're only allowed to utilize those avenues which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made an avenue. And secondly, you have to believe that this is a sabab and the ultimate musabbib is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we mentioned that in the dunya there are these three matters. There is the sabab and the natija. The sabab is the cause, the natija is the effect, the musabbib is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for example, you work hard at school and you revise for your exams. This is a sabab, this is a cause. What's the effect of working hard at school and revising for your exams? What's the natija? You pass. You do well academically, you do well inshallah. However, who is the musabbib and who does it go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, and this is why we have been told that whenever there's any type of ni'mah, then you ascribe it back to Allah. قُلْ هَذَا بِي فَضْلِ رَبِّي. So this is from the kindness of my Lord, because ultimately He is the musabbib. And this is the essence of At-Tawheed, that you don't ascribe blessings to your own self. Meaning you don't say, if somebody says to you, how did you do so well at university? You don't say, I worked hard and I revised and I studied and my method is really good. You say, firstly, it was the blessing of Allah. Now, and then after this, I utilize these things. How did you become so successful in the dunya? You don't say, I invested, I saved, I was shrewd, blah, blah, blah. You say, قُلْ هَذَا بِفَضْلِ رَبِّي. This is from the kindness of Allah. And then after this, I utilize this message and this message. So this is the essence of At-Tawheed. If a person utilizes a sabab, thinking it is a sabab, however Allah subhanahu has not made it a sabab, then this is shirkun asghar. If a person utilizes something, thinking it is a sabab, however there is no evidence that it is a sabab, then this is shirkun asghar. Let me give an example, let me clarify this. When we say firstly that there's evidence that it is sabab, meaning either evidences directly from the Qur'an and the Sunnah, or evidence by way of tajruba, by way of experience and experimentation. Right? Let me give you an example. Perhaps this is a good example to give. You'll have seen nowadays many people or some people are wearing copper bracelets now, and they say that these copper bracelets, they actually help with rheumatism and like arthritis and things like this. Now, even in pharmacies, if you go to pharmacies, you will see metal or copper bracelets to help you with I think it's blood circulation and issues with regards to bones and joints, etc. Shaykh Ibn Abbaas rahimahullah, he was asked that are we allowed to wear such copper bracelets, or is it considered to be a shirk? Because remember, many amongst the Quraysh, like the Hindus for example, they wear amulets, now what we call tama'im, and they wear amulets around their wrists, around their ankles, and around their necks, thinking that they provide some form of help or save from misfortune. Shaykh Ibn Abbaas rahimahullah, his answer was that if these copper bracelets have been proven by way of the Sharia, or by way of at-tajarub, by way of experience and experimentation, scientifically proven that yes, there is a medicinal effect or some type of property behind this that helps with the body, then it's permitted. However, if this is not proven scientifically by way of experience, then it comes under minor shirk. Why is a minor shirk or not major shirk? Because the person believes that this is something which Allah has placed upon the earth. So for example, medicine, why do you take medicine? Because you believe that Allah has made medicine an avenue or a cause for cure, for the cure of illnesses. So we take medicine, even though, and we rely on these medicines, even though we know the ultimate cure is from Allah, but Allah cures people through medicine. So if something has been proved scientifically, or by way of, and it's become famous amongst the people, well known from generation upon generation, and it's proven that this matter, yes, it does help with this, then it's allowed. However, if a person does it thinking it's a sabab, but Allah did not make it a sabab, then it is shirkul asghar. For example, I'll come to you. For example, tama'im, amulets. What is the ruling of wearing tama'im, amulets? It can either be shirkul akbar, or it can be shirkul asghar, or it can be haram. Now, without it being shirk. Tama'im meaning ta'weed, ta'weed. So when is it shirkun akbar? When a person believes that the amulet itself is the one which is protecting me from jinn, from bad luck, from jealousy, from ain, etc. So if you believe that the amulet is al-mu'athir, al-musabbib, it is the amulet in of itself which protects a person, then this is shirkun akbar. If a person believes that this amulet, Allah has made it a sabab for my protection, then it is shirk. But it is shirkun asghar, because this person believes ultimately it is Allah, but this amulet, Allah has made it a cause. However, we know Allah has not made it a cause, so we call this shirkun asghar. And when is it haram, but we don't call it shirk? If the tama'im is written from Qur'an. Now the ta'weed written from Qur'an, we don't call it shirk. Why? Because it's the words of Allah. It's the Qur'an, if it is the Qur'an. However, we say it's haram because it was not found during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Does that mean the Quraysh were doing minor shirk? Because they were saying that the idols, they don't give it back.
No, that's major shirk. Because invoking an idol is major shirk by the evidences of the Qur'an. By the evidences of the Qur'an. Now, when Allah called them kuffar, Allah called them mushrikun.
I've seen some people online, they wear like necklaces with Ayatul Kursi on it. Was that be major shirk?
First if you ask them that why are you wearing this necklace, if they say that I'm wearing it just for fashion, just for beauty, fashion, looks nice, then we say it's haram, because Ayatul Kursi was not revealed for you to wear it as an item of fashion, and in fact this is a type of belittling of the Quran. Now, if they say that I'm wearing it because Allah subhanahu will protect me through His words, Ayatul Kursi, we say no, it's haram to do this. They may be the words of Allah, but Allah did not reveal them to be worn around the amir. Rather, you say it and Allah protects you. If they say that this necklace in of itself is protecting me, then it's shirk. So that is with regards to ad-du'a. We said the person has to be hayyun, hadirun, qadirun, and has to be a sabab, and you believe that he is only a sabab. Then after this, the author mentioned al-khawf. And what's the definition of al-khawf? How do we define fear or al-khawf? How do we define fear or al-khawf? No.
You don't define it.
I mean, there's no need to define it. Everybody understands al-khawf. We understand al-mahabba. We understand al-ghadab. There's no need to define it. Sometimes, when you define matters which are already known, you confuse them even more. For example, if somebody said to you, define for me water, or if a khatib stood at Yawm al-Jum'ah and he mentioned water by defining it, nobody would understand. What are you talking about? Hey, hydrogen particles, molecules linked to oxygen molecules. If somebody said water, everybody understands water. So sometimes defining something makes it more complex. There's no need to define al-khawf and mahabba and things which are known. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَلَا تَخَافُوا وَخَافُونِ إِن كُنْتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. Allah established in this ayah that al-khawf is ibadah. Why? Because He ordered with al-khawf, and anything Allah orders with means it is ibadah. What are the types of al-khawf? What are the three types of al-khawf? Khawf al-sir. So, or in another way, khawf which is shirkun akbar, and khawf which is haram, and khawf which is jaiz, permitted. So when is khawf shirkun akbar?
Is that when you give something? Is that when you fear something to the same level that you should fear Allah?
No, the khawf of ibadah. No, the khawf with complete tadallul, with complete humility and submission and complete fear which we have towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So directly this to other than Allah, it is shirk and kufr. And when is khawf haram? When is, meaning khawf from the people? Khawf from the people, when is it haram?
Is that when, for example, somebody avoids doing the wajib because they have some irrational fear, for example?
Even rational fear.
Okay, rational fear.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, if your fear of people leads you to neglecting the wajibat or doing something which is haram, then it is haram. Now, unless it is a real danger threat to a person's life or to a person's property or to a person's family, then that is different. Now, and we said even if it's a word of kufr, even if somebody threatens you physically that your life is in danger, unless you say the word of kufr, you say the word of kufr. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, what's the evidence for that? إِلَّا مَنْ أُكْرِهَ وَقَلْبُهُ مُطْمَئِنٌ بِالْإِيمَانِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, except for the one who's coerced, but his heart is tranquil with al-Iman.
What about if you leave a sunnah due to fear of the people? Is that haram?
Anyway, it's permitted for a person to, when he says sunnah, you're referring to nafil actions. And the nawafil in of themselves can be left. Even if it's for no reason a person can. You could say that there's a sin not for leaving the action, but the fact that you left it because you're embarrassed. So perhaps Allahu A'lam, the sin is in your embarrassment or your fear of the people, as opposed to leaving the action itself. As for the nawafil or the sunan, then they're not obligations as such. And when is khawf jaiz? When is it permitted to fear other than Allah? When is it permitted to fear other than Allah? Anybody else? Who's not answered so far? When is it feared? So when is it permitted to fear other than Allah?
Coercion. Forced.
No.
You're being forced.
A natural fear.
Yeah.
No. Al-khawf al-tabi'i. Like we said, fear from a snake, being scared from a predator, being scared of a criminal, being scared of the fire. This is al-khawf al-tabi'i. This is something which Allah has placed in people's hearts. But we are not allowed to fear anybody or anything like our fear of Allah. So, is it allowed for a person to fear the jinn? No. Just like you fear a human is treacherous, but can your fear of the jinn be equal to the fear of Allah? No. And look, there's a side point. I mention these side points because they're relevant, contemporary, and they're important. There are people out there, who believe in conspiracy theories, and of course, I'm sure there are conspiracies that are true, because we have to be intelligent enough to know that not everything is as it seems. We know there are plotters, we know there are schemers, we know there's ulterior motives behind things. However, your fear of conspiracy theories or forces at play should not be to the level as if you're giving them the attributes of Allah. And you'll have seen people, they say the Illuminati, they hear everything, they see everything, they can make out the vibrations from your phone. When you speak, make sure, it is only Allah who hears everything. It's Allah who fears everything. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who sees everything. So we have to be very careful that we don't give these attributes to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you hear some people speaking about the Illuminati and wherever, and it's as if they're describing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their ability and their seeing and their hearing and their knowledge. No. We believe this is for Allah alone. At the same time, we're intelligent enough to not completely deny external forces and that everything is not as it seems. We know that. But we don't make it out as if they hear, see, know, and control everything. No? And then after this, we came to Ar-Raja. And Ar-Raja is hope. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو لِقَاءَ رَبِّهِ فَلْيَعْمَلْ عَمَلًا صَالِحًا وَلَا يُشْرِكْ بِعِبَادَةِ رَبِّهِ أَحَدًا. So where did Allah affirm in this ayah that al-raja is ibadah? No, firstly, because he began by mentioning al-raja and then he ended with wala yushrik bi-ibadati rabbihi. So do not ascribe any type of promise to Allah in al-ibadah. Also, the fact that Allah is praising the people of raja. He said, فَمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو لِقَاءَ رَبِّهِ, the one who has hope in the meeting with his Lord. Meaning he's praising those people who do righteous actions. And what we said about al-khawf, we say about al-raja. So, are we allowed to place our hope in other than Allah? It depends. It depends what type of raja. So, if it is al-raja al-ibadah and al-raja al-sir, then directing to other than Allah is shirk, meaning complete hope with ta'zeem, with tadallul, with khudu, which is the definition of al-ibadah, then it becomes a shirk. If your hope in somebody or something else means you leave off a wajib or you commit haram, then that raja is haram. And then there is al-raja al-jaiz, raja which is allowed, and this is al-raja al-tabi'i. What we said about al-khawf al-tabi'i also we apply to al-raja al-tabi'i. Like I said, you ring somebody, say, look, my flight is landing tomorrow 5 p.m. I hope you'll be there to pick me up. Al-raja al-tabi'i. And what's the evidence for this? Like we said regarding dua, the life of the Prophet ﷺ, the life of the Sahaba, the general ayat of the Qur'an saying that we should help each other, it also applies to al-raja. And then after this, at-tawakkul. And what is the definition of at-tawakkul? What is the definition of at-tawakkul?
صدق الاعتماد على الله مع الثقة به والأخذ بالأسباب.
أحسنت. صدق الاعتماد على الله, what does it mean? صدق الاعتماد على الله, what does it mean?
Is having a truthful dependence on Allah.
نعم. مع الثقة, with complete trust. والأخذ بالأسباب,
along with fulfilling the means.
Now, the means which Allah has placed upon the earth. So, what is the mean or the avenue for having children? Getting married. What is the means or the avenue of growing crops, sowing seeds and watering them? What are the avenues or the means for a rizq and for sustenance, going out to work? What is the avenue or the means for protecting yourself from the cold, wearing clothes and putting on heaters and a blanket over you? These are avenues and means that Allah has placed upon the earth. So, if a person places all of his dependence upon Allah and he has complete trust in Him, but he does not fulfill the means, then this is a deficiency in what? No. In intellect, in a person's aql. So he's fulfilling the aqidah side of it, he's fulfilling tawheed because he's placing his trust upon Allah, but he's not very intelligent because he does not know how Allah created the dunya. He does not know al-asbab wa al-nata'ij. And this is the tawakkul of the Sufiyya and the Quburiyya and the Turuqiyya and such types of people. And if a person places all of his focus on the asbab but has no reliance and dependence upon Allah, then this is a deficiency in his aqidah, in his tawheed. And what do we call a person who does not fulfill the worldly means, meaning the asbab, and he says, but I'm having tawakkul upon Allah? What do we call this? At-tawakkul. Means somebody who's pretending to be pretending to have at-tawakkul. And again, what we said about al-khawf, wal-du'a, wal-raja, we say about at-tawakkul. Same thing. So is it allowed for us to depend and rely upon others? It depends. If it is at-tawakkul meaning sidqul i'timad wal-thiqa, with khudu, with tadallul, as a form of ibadah, then it is shirk akbar, to direct you to other than Allah. If your tawakkul upon somebody else means that you're going to leave off the wajibat and commit the muharramat, then this tawakkul is haram. As for at-tawakkul al-tabi'i, which is our natural dependence upon each other, because Allah has created us as humans, then this is something which is jaiz. like you said, I'm depending upon you to hand these papers in for me. I'm depending upon you, I'm relying upon you to do X, Y, Z for me. And this is known as al-wakala or al-tawkeel, and a person is your wakil, meaning your representative, who is on your behalf. And then after this, we mentioned al-raghba wal-rahba wal-khushu'. And this is from the ayah, إِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا يُسَارِعُونَ فِي الْخَيْرَاتِ وَيَدْعُونَنَا رَغَبًا وَرَهَبًا وَكَانُوا لَنَا خَاشِعِينَ. Where is the evidence that these three matters are ibadah? In this ayah where? What's the shahid? Sorry? Yeah, so,
and do all good actions.
Meaning Allah is praising those people. And whenever Allah praises a people, then that means He's pleased with their action, and anything Allah is pleased with is ibadah, and therefore directing ibadah to other than Allah is shirk and al-kufr. So Allah subhanahu, He praises those people who hasten to righteous actions, raghaban, hoping in His good reward, wa rahaban, and fearing His punishment, with al-khushu'. And then al-khashya. And what's the ta'rif of al-khashya? What's the definition of al-khashya? What's the definition of al-khashya? Al-khawf al-mabni ala al-ilm, right on, wa-ta'zim. Ahsan, good try there. Al-khawf al-mabni ala al-ilm wa-ta'zim. Fear of Allah based upon how much you know about Allah and how much you exalt Him. In the hadith of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "Ala inni a'lamukum billahi wa atqakum." Verily, I am the most knowing amongst you of Allah, and therefore the most fearing of Allah. So, why was the Prophet ﷺ more pious than all of us? Because he knew Allah more than we know Him. Why are the ulama and the awliya more pious than us? Because they know Allah subhanahu more than we know. So the more a person knows of Allah, the greater his piety and his khashya. And what is al-inaba, or what is the difference between at-tawbah and al-inaba? Or what is the definition of at-tawbah and what is the definition of al-inaba? At-tawbah is?
At-tawbah is when you turn back to Allah.
الرجوع إلى الله من المعصية إلى الطاعة. Returning back to Allah from disobedience to obedience. This meaning we repent, meaning I leave my act of disobedience, I'm returning my Lord in a state of repentance towards obedience. This is at-tawbah. And al-inaba
is abiding by the obedience.
لزوم الطاعة. لزوم الطاعة, abiding by that obedience.
How do people commit shirk in this?
Because al-inaba, which is submitting to somebody with obedience, its reality is ta'alluq al-qalb bi ghayrillah, is a person's heart being connected to other than Allah, and therefore it becomes a shirk. So when Allah subhanahu said wa anibu ila rabbikum, have inaba towards your Lord, anibu meaning return back to your Lord and submit to Him with obedience. We know that now inaba is ibadah. Why? Because Allah commanded with. Anything Allah commands with, He's pleased with it. Anything He's pleased with, it is ibadah. Therefore, directing to other than Allah becomes a shirk. So, al-inaba, which is luzum al-ta'a, which is sticking and complying to obedience, it shows that your heart is attached to Allah. So, if now instead of abiding by obedience to Allah, you're abiding by obedience to people, that means that you have an attachment of the heart to the people instead of Allah, so it becomes a shirk. As for, you could say like at-ta'a tabi'iyya, which is natural obedience. If I say to you, please, will you do something, you do it. This is tabi'i. This comes under what we said, al-khawf, al-du'a, al-raja, all of it is the same. And then after this, al-isti'ana, wal-isti'adha, wal-istighatha. What is the evidence that isti'ana is an act of worship? What is the dalil that isti'ana is an act of worship? إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. What's the difference between al-isti'adha wal-istighatha? What's the difference between al-isti'adha wa al-istighatha? Anybody?
Isti'ana is seeking help generally.
No.
And
Isti'adha.
And isti'ada is seeking help before the calamity.
No. Seeking refuge and protection before the calamity occurs. Talab al-awth. And istighatha.
It's after.
No. Seeking help during or after the calamity has occurred. No. And all of them are ibadat because of the ayat which are mentioned. The rulings of dua apply to al-isti'ana wal-isti'adha wal-istighatha. So when is it allowed to seek help or protection, refuge or rescue from other than Allah? Hayyun, hadirun, qadirun, sabab. Khalas? Whatever we said about dua, because the reality is that isti'ana, isti'adha, istighatha is a form of dua. It's a mas'ala. It is a form of requesting and seeking help. And then after this we mentioned al-dhabh, and al-dhabh is slaughtering in the name of Allah. And the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, لَعْنَ اللَّهُ مَنْ ذَبَحَ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ. May the curse of Allah be upon a person who slaughters for other than Allah, meaning in the name of other than Allah. And we said that al-dhabh is types. So dhabh can be ibadah, and that is when that dhabh is done ta'zeeman, in exalting Allah with at-tadallul and al-khudu, which are the definitions of al-ibadah, and out of taqarrub, seeking closeness to Allah. So for example, the udhiyah, which we slaughter on Eid al-Adha, the ibadah is in the spilling of the blood. And this is why it's recommended that a person slaughters the animal himself and then distributes the animal himself, even if it's to the local community, because the actual ibadah is in the action of spilling the blood, meaning you are slaughtering the animal taqarruban ila Allah, seeking closeness to Allah. طبعا in this country sometimes people can't do it, and therefore they pay for it to be done in their names. This inshallah also comes under the same form of ibadah. And then there is al-dhabh, which a person does ikraman lil-dayf or al-walima, and this is something which is mustahab. Slaughter an animal because a guest has come to your house to offer him meat, or for the walima of a wedding, or a general invitation to feed the people. This is something which is recommended. And then there is dhabh, which is permitted, and that is slaughtering an animal for business, for selling meat, a butcher, a slaughterhouse. This is when it is permitted. And then there is another, and another is taking a vow in the name of Allah to obligate something upon yourself. And now we come to Al-Thalaatha, which is now the second principle, meaning the second question in the grave. تفضل.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. اللهم اغفر لنا ولشيخنا ولجميع المؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الأصل الثاني معرفة دين الإسلام بالأدلة، وهو الاستسلام لله بالتوحيد والانقياد له بالطاعة والبراءة من الشرك وأهله، وهو 3 مراتب: الإسلام والإيمان والإحسان، وكل مرتبة لها أركان. المرتبة الأولى الإسلام.
So then the author mentioned Al-Aslu Thani, the second principle, and that is, the second question in the grave, and that is Ma'rifatu Din al-Islam, knowing the religion of Islam bil adillah, along with its evidences. So the author will mention the fundamentals of al-Islam, of the deen, along with their evidences. And why is the author going to mention evidences? Why is the author going to mention the adillah? Because what benefits you in terms of your Islam is fulfilling the fundamentals of Islam through knowing the evidences. As for fulfilling the evidences of Islam because of blind following, then this is of no benefit. So you have to pray salah because you know that Allah commands you to pray salah in the Qur'an. Not because, but this is what we do. It's our culture, we pray salah. No, you have to do it because Allah orders you to do it in the Qur'an. So you read Aqimus Salah, now you know that salah is wajib. This is why he will mention the adillah. So he said, Al-Thani, the second principle, it is knowing the original Islam with its evidence. First, he defined Al-Islam. He said, what is the meaning of Al-Islam? Al-Istislamu lillahi bil-Tawheed wal-Inqiyadu lahu bil-Ta'a wal-Bara'atu min al-Shirki wa ahlihi. He said, Al-Islam, it means Al-Istislamu lillahi bil-Tawheed, submitting to Allah upon At-Tawheed. Wal-Inqiyadu lahu bil-Ta'a, and complying to his obedience. وَالْبَرَاءَةُ مِنَ الشِّرْكِ وَأَهْلِهِ, and disassociating yourself from shirk and its people. Meaning, Al-Islam, it compromises of three matters. The first of them is Al-Istislam. And Al-Istislam means complete submission. So when you say Muslim, meaning Mustaslim. The meaning of Muslim is Mustaslim. That I have submitted myself to the laws of Allah. Muslim, a Mustaslim. So Al-Islam does not mean, as people say, Islam means peace. Islam does not mean peace. Peace is a part of Islam. And Islam calls to peace. And one of the names of Allah is As-Salam, the one who gives safety, security and peace. And Islam was revealed to bring safety and security for humanity in this dunya and the akhirah. However, its meaning is not peace. So there's a difference between Al-Islam and As-Salam. As-Salam means peace. As for Al-Islam, it means Al-Istislam. It means complete submission to Allah. And there are two ways in which people submit to Allah. There are two ways in which people submit to Allah. There is Al-Istislam Al-Shar'i and Al-Istislam Al-Qadari. Al-Istislam Al-Shar'i and Al-Istislam Al-Qadari. Al-Istislam Al-Shar'i is when you make a conscious choice to submit to the Sharia of Allah. So the Muslimun, they submit to the Sharia of Allah. The Mushrikun, the Hindus, the Nasara, the Yahud, they have not made that choice to submit to the Tawheed of Allah. So this is Al-Istislam Al-Shar'i. Then there is Al-Istislam Al-Qadari, and that is universal submission to Allah. In reality, everything and every person is a Muslim. In reality, everything and every person is a Muslim. Why? Because whether they like it or not, they submit to the laws of Allah. They submit to the qadr of Allah. Na'am. But this is without a choice or conscious decision. And so there's no reward based upon this. There's no reward based upon a person. If a person said, look, I am a Muslim because my nature submits to Allah, because I will die whenever Allah decides for me to die. And say there's no reward for this. Naam, you can say you're a Muslim, meaning Al-Istislam Al-Qadari. Naam. And this includes Iblis and Fir'aun, because nobody escapes the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when we say Islam, we mean Al-Istislam Al-Shar'i, meaning a conscious choice of submitting to the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Qur'an, in Surah Al-Imran, وَلَهُ أَسْلَمَ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ طَوْعًا وَكَرْهًا. He said, and to him, أَسْلَمَ, submits. Everything in the heavens and the earth, طَوْعًا وَكَرْهًا, whether it's by choice or whether it's by force. Everything submits to the command of Allah. Everything Aslam. But that is Al-Istislam Al-Qadari, the universal submission to, the birds submit to the command of Allah. They do whatever Allah created them to do. And Iblis was in submission to Allah, meaning he did what Allah decreed for him to do. It wasn't a choice. Where is the reward? Al-Istislam al-Shar'i. That you make a conscious choice to submit and implement the laws of Allah Jalla Sha'nu. So this is the first part of the religion of Islam, Al-Istislamu lillahi bit-Tawheed. Secondly, Al-Inqiyadu lahu bit-Ta'ah. That you comply, and compliance to Allah in His obedience. Tab'an, obedience is two types. Either it is wajib or it is mustahab. So you obey Allah through the wajibat or through the mustahabbat. Mustahab meaning the encouraged voluntary actions of al-Islam. So if a person says, I believe, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, and I believe in Jannah, I believe in Jahannam completely. However, I'm not going to comply to the commandments of Allah, Salah, Zakah, Hajj. See, you can't be a Muslim. In order to be a Muslim, you have to accept the Tawheed of Allah and you have to comply to His obedience. Yes, you may commit sins. Yes, you may neglect some of the wajibat. Yes, you may fall short in some of them. But as a mabda, as a basic principle, you accept the compliance to the obedience of Allah and His laws. And then thirdly, al-bara'atu min ash-shirk wa ahlihi, that a person has to have bara'a from shirk and its people. And what is the asl of al-bara'a? Al-bughd fil qulub. Hatred in the heart. The asl of al-bara'a, like you mentioned previously, is al-bughd fil qulub. And disassociating yourself from ash-shirk necessitates disassociating yourself from the people of shirk and the actions of shirk, the statements of shirk, the festivals of shirk. All of this comes under al-bara'atu min ash-shirk. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said regarding Ibrahim alayhi salam, إِذْ قَالُوا لِقَوْمِهِمْ إِنَّا بُرَآءُ مِنْكُمْ وَمِمَّا تَعْبُدُونَ. When Ibrahim and those who had iman with him said to their people, verily we free ourselves from you and that which you worship besides Allah. So he freed himself from the people of shirk and shirk itself. Now, طبعا, it's important for us to understand the concept of al-hub wal-bughd fillah, loving and hating for the sake of Allah. It's important for us to understand the meaning of hating the kuffar. Now, this should not be misunderstood. In Islam, hating does not mean violence and inciting hatred with the English concept of hatred. This is not the meaning of al-bughd. So you could hate your neighbor who is a kafir, bughd fillah, you hate him for the sake of Allah, and at the same time you have dinner with him, you give him gifts sincerely, you smile with him, you help him out in his affairs. Now, in English, it's not possible that you hate somebody and then you're going to dine with him, socialize with him, give him gifts, visit him when he's ill, be there for him when his times of need. If you hate somebody, you don't do that. The concept of al-bughd in Islam is al-bughd fillah, meaning your hatred or your aversion is not because of the person, but because of the act of shirk or the act of kufr. Meaning, you hate for Allah to be disobeyed. You hate for a person to disobey Allah. And this bughd fillah, this hatred for the sake of Allah, is not restricted to only non-Muslims, to any person, in fact every person. I think we mentioned previously, that what is our belief regarding loving and hating people, that our love and hatred of a person is in accordance to how much obedience and disobedience they have of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning, in your heart, you could have a combination of love and hatred towards another person. In your heart, you can have a combination of al-hub wal-bughd at the same time. You love a Muslim according to the amount of obedience and taqwa and sunnah and righteousness and piety that he has, and you hate a Muslim according to the amount of fisq and dhunub and bid'ah and ma'asiyah that he has. So we don't hate any Muslim absolutely. Because he's a Muslim, a mu'min, we have a basis of hub. However, the level of al-hub wal-bughd is dependent upon the level of obedience and disobedience. Meaning, is your love of the ulama equal to your love of the common Muslim on the streets? No. Why? Because the ulama in terms of their taqwa and in terms of their sunnah and istiqamah and the obedience to Allah is much higher than the average Muslim, and therefore your love of the ulama and the awliya is greater. We're not talking about the Prophet ﷺ and the Anbiya and the Rusul. For them we have any pure love for the sake of Allah. But we're talking about a common Muslim. At the same time we have love and hatred. As for the non-Muslim, there is no muhabba shar'iyya, but there can be muhabba tabi'iyya, which we gave examples of a Muslim man loving his wife who is a kitabiyya, a Muslim father loving his son who is a non-Muslim. Muhabba tabi'iyya. A Muslim neighbor having affection towards a non-Muslim neighbor who is good towards him and is kind and is gentle. There's hub tabi'i. Naam.
Ustadh, can I just take your permission that I need to leave?
Exactly.
Inshallah in 2 minutes.
Exactly. Now, so that is understanding al-hub wal-bughd fillah.
Should we hate the innovators?
Same thing. According to the level of sunnah and the level of bid'ah. So, because look, the mubtadi'ah, the innovators are not all equal. And it's not that every innovator is of the same level. No, just as innovation, bid'ah is types and different levels and degrees of severity, then like this, your love and your hatred of them will depend. So there are some from amongst Ahlul Bidah who are closer to Ahlul Sunnah, and there are others who are further away from Ahlul Sunnah, and there are some whose harm upon the Muslims is less, and there are some whose harm is more severe. So for example, the Prophet ﷺ spoke severely about the Khawarij. Why? Because the harms of the Khawarij and the bid'ah of the Khawarij is severe. And then there are others, like for example the Ash'a'ira, and the Ash'a'ira are not like the Khawarij. And in some or many aspects they are closer to Ahlul Sunnah. So we don't hate the Khawarij, the Ash'a'ira like the hatred of the Khawarij, for example. So it depends. Obviously when you say bid'ah, we're not talking about the bid'ah which reaches the level of kufr, because then that becomes al-kufr. So if you say bid'ah and you mean bid'ah mukaffira, the bid'ah which level of kufr, like the bid'ah of shirk and the bid'ah of the Rafida, the Shia, no, then that's the level of kufr. That's something which is separate. No.
So some people say you hate the sin but not the sinner. Is that the gist of it?
If he's a Muslim, it's ambiguous to say that, because hating the sin, it necessitates that you hate the person who sinned, but the point is that it's not a personal hatred, it's not a personal grudge, it's a hatred because you don't like to see Allah being disobeyed in that person, so you hate it for the sake of Allah. You have that hatred for the sake of Allah. So you can't, and you don't. It's a bit ambiguous to say that. It's not completely correct. You can't say we hate the bid'ah but we don't hate the innovators. No, we hate the bid'ah and we hate the people who are spreading the bid'ah. The Messenger ﷺ said, "La'an Allah man awa muhdithan." May the curse of Allah be upon a person who accommodates an innovator. So you hate the innovator as well, but with the Islamic concept of hatred. And this is why people make a mistake when they think that every innovator has to be boycotted, and it's not correct. Boycotting, hajjul mubtadi', boycotting the innovator is based upon al-masalih wal-mafasid, weighing up the potential benefits and the potential harms.
Is that for the person to do or for people of knowledge to do?
No, once again. Boycotting an innovator is based upon weighing up the potential benefits and the potential harms. So where there is more benefit, maslaha, in boycotting an innovator, then he is to be boycotted. And where there is a greater harm, in boycotting the innovator, then the innovator is not boycotted. Now, as for hating, meaning hating the innovation and hating the innovator, then that remains. But it's not an absolute hatred, because he's still a Muslim. So there's some love there and there's some hatred there. How severe and how much is the love and the hatred, depending upon how much Islam he has and how much bid'ah he has. How much he's closer to Sunnah, how much he's closer to bid'ah. That is how it is weighed up now.
When you talk about boycotting and you said to weigh them up, is that for the person to do it themselves or for personal knowledge to? So do you need to get fatwa?
It's the personal knowledge who firstly recognizes a bid'ah. And how will a common person recognize what's a bid'ah? And it's a person of knowledge who will be able to weigh up the harms and the benefits. But when we say person of knowledge, and you shouldn't think that we're referring to 4 or 5 ulama only. Now, so for example, let's say in this community, the people of knowledge is the imam, and those who have studied the issues, they're the people who are of knowledge. But if we say to the common Muslim, start boycotting, they won't understand. But we say to look, follow the example of the imam in your masjid who has knowledge of these matters. Now, so that's the meaning of the people of knowledge. So that is the definition of al-Islam. Al-Istislamu lillahi bil-tawheed wal-inqiyadu lahu bil-ta'a wal-bara'atu min ash-shirki wahid. Then the author said, وَهُوَ ثَلَاثُ مَرَاتِبٍ الإسلام والإيمان والإحسان وكل مرتبة لها أركان. That the deen, if we take our deen as a whole, if we take the religion of Islam as a whole, then it is 3 layers. The most basic layer is al-Islam, then the layer which is higher is al-Iman, then the layer which is higher is al-Ihsan. And each one of these layers has its arkan, meaning its pillars. How do we know that our religion compromises of these 3 layers? The hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam, which we're going to study afterwards. Jibreel alayhi salam came in the form of a man to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Firstly, he said, Ya Rasulullah, akhbirni anil Islam. O Messenger of Allah, tell me what Islam is. And the Prophet sallallahu mentioned the pillars of Islam. Then he said, O Messenger of Allah, akhbirni anil Iman. Inform me what is Iman. And then the Messenger sallallahu informed of Iman and the pillars of Al-Iman. Then he said, Ya Rasulullah, akhbirni anil Ihsan. O Messenger of Allah, inform me about Al-Ihsan. And then the Prophet sallallahu mentioned the definition, or mentioned the Ihsan and the pillars of Ihsan. We'll study this afterwards. The point is that where did the author take this categorization of a deen into 3 layers? From the hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam. That's the evidence. طيب. What's the difference between al-Islam wal-Iman wal-Ihsan, and why is it that al-Islam is the most basic layer of the religion, then Iman is the next layer up, then Ihsan is the next layer up? And this is what we need to understand. Firstly, when the word al-Islam or al-Iman, when they are mentioned, they mean exactly the same thing, right? So al-Islam is synonymous with al-Iman and vice versa. A mu'min is a Muslim and a Muslim is a mu'min. If I say to you, accept Islam, meaning accept Iman. Now, if I say to you, do you have Iman, meaning do you have al-Islam? So when al-Islam or al-Iman are mentioned mutlaqan, when they are mentioned absolutely without any restriction, without a particular context, Islam means Iman, Iman means Islam. There's no difference between them. A Muslim is a mu'min, a mu'min is a Muslim. However, when Islam and when Iman are mentioned together, like in the same context, then there's a differentiation. Then there's a difference between them. And no, write that down. For example, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Ya ayyuhal ladina amanu, all those who have Iman, who is he calling out? Who is he addressing? Muslims. Is he addressing a particular layer of Muslims? No, he's addressing the Muslims. Because Iman is Islam, Islam is Iman, the Muslims are mu'min, mu'mineen are Muslimun, there's no difference. Now, when you say, Allahumma ghfir lil mu'mineen wal mu'minat, Who are you asking Allah to forgive? The Muslims, those who are around you, who you see, not a special layer of Muslims. In the Sharia, in fiqh and in the Sharia, you have certain terms. The ulama say, إِذَا تَفَرَّقَا اجْتَمَعَا وَإِذَا اجْتَمَعَا تَفَرَّقَا. Take this as a principle. There are certain terms in the fiqh and Sharia, إِذَا تَفَرَّقَا اجْتَمَعَا وَإِذَا اجْتَمَعَا تَفَرَّقَا. Meaning, when they are separated, they come together, and when they come together, they are separated. Meaning, two terms, when they are mentioned independently, they actually have the same meaning. And when they are mentioned together, then they have a separate meaning. Okay? What are they called? Words, alfaz. إِذَا تَفَرَّقَا اجْتَمَعَا وَإِذَا اجْتَمَعَا تَفَرَّقَا. خلاص? For example, miskin and faqir. When you say miskin, it means faqir. When you say faqir, it means miskin. So when you say, and generally meaning poor and needy. Now in Islam, in the Sharia, when you say give to the masakin, meaning give to the fuqara. Give to the fuqara, meaning give to the masakin. When they mention independently and mutlaqan, absolutely, without any restriction or context, miskin means faqir, faqir means miskin. طيب. In the Qur'an, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَى وَالْمَسَاكِينَ. Verily, your sadaqat, meaning your zakat, is to be given to the fuqara and to the masakin. If they mean the same thing, why did Allah mention them as two separate categories? Because they are from those terms, إِذَا تَفَرَّقَا اجْتَمَعَا وَإِذَا اجْتَمَعَا تَفَرَّقَا. When they are mentioned independently, it means the same thing. But when they mention within a context, or in the same ayah or same sentence, then they actually mean two different things. And now the difference between faqir and miskin is the faqir is the one who has absolute poverty and he has nothing. And the miskin is the one who has some level of income, however it has not reached a level of sufficiency. So for example, when it comes to giving zakat in this country, are there fuqara, yani people who have absolutely nothing? Very, very rarely. Very, very rarely are there, if they even do exist in this country, absolute fuqara. And when we think of fuqara, and we think of people like in Asia, in Africa, who have no houses, severe droughts, no money, we say fuqara. But in this country, in our society, in our masajid, are there masakin? There are masakin. There are people who have some level of income, but we know that that income is not sufficient to fulfill 3 months of living. They are living from paycheck to paycheck, from debt to debt, just about paying their bills. And maybe some of their bills are not being paid. And there are many, many examples of this. So those people are deserving of our zakah within our own communities. Like this, al-Islam wal-Iman. Islam means Iman, Iman means Islam. However, when they are mentioned in one context or with restrictions, then they have separate meanings. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, قَالَتِ الْأَعْرَابُ آمَنَّا. The A'rab, the Bedouins, they said, we have Iman. قُلْ لَمْ تُؤْمِنُوا. Say to them, you have not had Iman. وَلَكِنْ قُولُوا أَسْلَمْنَا. But say, you have Islam. So here, because Iman and Islam was mentioned within one context, that means there's a difference between it. In the hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam, he first asked him about Islam, and then within the same context, he asked him about Al-Iman. That means now there's an independent meaning. So, that's the first thing to understand. Now, if they are mentioned in the same context or with certain restrictions, what's the difference? The difference is that Islam refers to the apparent actions of our religion, and Iman refers to the state and the belief in the heart. Otherwise, Islam and Iman, they mean the same thing. And how do we know? How do we know this distinction? Yani, where did we get this distinction from? That Islam refers to the apparent actions of the religion, and Iman refers to what's in the heart. Where did I get this from? Hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam. Because when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam informed Jibreel what is Islam, what did he say? saying the shahada, it's a physical verbal action, it's a statement. Praying your salah, physical, apparent, can be seen. Giving your zakah, physical, can be seen. Performing hajj, performing siyam, something which is physical can be seen. When he told him what is iman, what did he say? أن تؤمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله واليوم الآخر والقدر خيره وشره. That which refers to the heart. طيب. Why is this important? How do we judge whether a person has entered into our religion or not? How do we judge? How do we judge whether this person has entered into our religion or is of our religion?
If we see them testify the shahada.
Meaning, not even that. I mean, for example, a brother now walks into the masjid. How do you know he's a Muslim?
His actions.
His actions. We look from the outside. If we see that he prays with us, he fasts with us, he does Eid with us, he has a Muslim name, he marries our women, yani Islamic nikah, he faces our qibla, he reads our book, khalas, we say he's a Muslim. And we don't doubt his Islam. And we don't say, in order for me to verify whether you're a Muslim, let me look into your iman. Come here, let me sit with you, let me test you about your iman. No. We see a person eats halal meat, does iftar with us, does Eid with us, faces our qibla, khalas, we say he's a Muslim. And we have no doubt that he is a Muslim. As for what is hidden, that's with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As for what is hidden, that's with Allah. We cannot judge that. We can't say that I don't accept anybody being a Muslim unless I know his aqidah is an aqidah of tawheed. I cannot say he's a Muslim. No, that's not for you. All you look at is actions. Now, if he does an apparent action which negates and invalidates Islam, then we can say that he's no longer a Muslim based upon the apparent action. Now, so he might pray with us, but then we see him going to the grave and supplicating to the wali in the grave, asking for help and cure and children, khalas. Now his action has invalidated his al-Islam. Otherwise, the Islam of a person is based upon the apparent actions of al-Islam. Now the actions which I mentioned. And this is the Salaf mentioned this. Said, Man salla ila qiblatina, whoever akala luhumana, whoever faces our qibla and eats our meat, he's a Muslim. Meaning, whoever apparently does the basic action of Islam, we say he is a Muslim. No.
So the asl, if you see someone doing normal actions, he's Muslim.
No.
And does that count to the extent that he's supposed to put Ahl Sunnah? Like, you assume he's Ahl Sunnah until he does an innovation, or?
No, this is now a different issue. And this is with regards to al-asl fil muslimin. What is the base ruling with regards to Muslims? Is it as-salam or is it al-jahala? Is it that we assume people are upon the sunnah unless we see the opposite? Or is it that we assume Muslims are not upon the sunnah until we see them to be upon the sunnah? So that's a different issue. We're talking about how to recognize somebody is a Muslim. Now, how to recognize somebody being a Muslim.
The argument of ignorance not coming, as in, like, say we see him worshipping at the grave, but he doesn't have like the evidence saying that not to worship at the grave.
No, look, there are some aspects of Islam in which ignorance is not an excuse. Now, so worshipping people in the grave, there's no excuse for ignorance. But then what Islam did you enter into? Which Islam does he even know? What does La ilaha illallah mean? La ma'buda bihaqqin illallah. So now he's supplicating at the graves, and Islam is actually worshipping the one of the graves. Which Islam, which La ilaha illallah did you say? You understand? So now for some things there's an excuse of ignorance. For other things there's no excuse of ignorance.
So can you generalize and say that someone who has a
let's stick with the dars. Let's stop these questions about one. Let's just stick to the dars, inshallah. Now, so al-Islam are the basic apparent actions of Islam, and we judge a person by these actions of al-Islam. And then the oath mentioned Arkanul Islam Khams, and there are 5 pillars of al-Islam. These 5 pillars of Islam, they are the most fundamental obligatory actions of Islam. If anybody negates their obligation, then he's a kafir. if anybody negates the obligation of these pillars, then he is a kafir, after knowing them. So for example, if a new Muslim entered into Islam, entered into Islam 2-3 days ago, and then he says there's no such thing as a Hajj, we excuse that person. Why? Because he entered into Islam 3-4 days ago. A person who lived as a Muslim, grew up in the Muslim community, and then he says there's no such thing as Hajj, there's no excuse. Why? Because the legislation of Hajj is known bid-darura, it's known by default. Every single Muslim, from the most ignorant to the most knowing, knows that in Islam there's something called Hajj. Now, he may differ with some particulars of Hajj, some details of Hajj, some of the conditions of Hajj, but as a legislation, he knows that there's something in our religion called Al-Hajj, and like this, As-Salah, etc. So, now, these 5 pillars, we said these are the most fundamental, obligatory, foremost actions and i'tiqad of the religion. And they are ma'lumun bid-darura, known by default, and whoever rejects their obligation is a kafir after knowing them. And this negates, for example, as somebody who has just entered into Al-Islam, or it negates somebody who has a mental illness and he says something without knowing. So it negates those people. And like I said, if you look at the 5 pillars of Islam, Arkanul Islam, then all of them are apparent actions. So this shows that Islam are those apparent actions. The author mentioned the evidence. He said the hadith of Ibn Umar, that the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "Buniya al-Islamu ala khams, shahadati an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadan Rasulullah wa iqami salah wa ita'i zakah wa sawmi Ramadan wa hajj al-bayt." So he mentioned the 5 pillars of Islam. This hadith, the hadith of Ibn Umar, it is mentioned in Al-Bukhari and Muslim. Al-Bukhari in the book of Al-Iman. Al-Bukhari in the book of Al-Iman. And each one of these 5 pillars has an obligatory aspect and a voluntary aspect. Yani each one of these 5 pillars, or should we say the 4 pillars, and the last 4 pillars, each one of them has something which is wajib and something which is nafl or mustahab. Meaning salah, there's wajib salah, mustahab salah. Saum, there's wajib saum, there's mustahab saum. Zakah, there is something which is wajib, which we call zakatul mal, and then there's a mustahab, meaning general sadaqah. Hajj, there's something which is wajib, meaning your first hajj is wajib, and then there's something which is mustahab, which are the voluntary hajj that a person does. So the meaning of this is the obligatory aspect. The obligatory aspect. And each one of these pillars, i.e. the 4 pillars after the first one, or in fact even the first one, they are not exclusive to the religion of Islam. So all of these pillars and these acts of worship, salah, zakah, Sawm and Hajj, they were there even in the previous prophets and the previous shara'i'. What's the evidence for that? With regards to Sawm, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu kutiba alaykum as-siyam kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum. O people of Iman, Sawm has been prescribed upon you, fasting, just as it was prescribed upon those who came before you. So that shows us Sawm was already there. And with regards to Salah, Allah mentioned regarding Ismail alayhi salam, He said, وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ إِسْمَعِيلَ إِنَّهُ كَانَ صَادِقَ الْوَعْدِ وَكَانَ رَسُولًا نَبِيًّا وَكَانَ يَأْمُرُ أَهْلَهُ بِالصَّلَاةِ وَالزَّكَاةِ. And he used to order his family with as-salah and az-zakah. And with regards to al-hajj, then when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke about Ibrahim alayhi salam, then he said, وَأَذِّن فِي النَّاسِ بِالْحَجِّ. Proclaim, O Ibrahim, amongst the people to perform al-hajj. So that shows us that salah and zakah and hajj and Ramadan, or sorry, Sawm, fasting, it existed in the original religion of the Yahud and the Nasara and all the prophets and messengers. Yes, the details may differ in terms of how many and what constitutes salah and zakah and what is given and who is it given to and when is it given, etc. That may differ, but the asl of these ibadat, they all existed in the previous religion. No. And Allah said, Inna deena inda Allahi al-Islam. that the only religion which Allah accepts is Al-Islam, meaning Al-Istislam lillahi bit-Tawheed, complete submission to Allah upon At-Tawheed. And when we say Al-Islam, there are two meanings of Al-Islam. There are two meanings of Al-Islam. Al-Islam al-Aam wal-Islam al-Khas. Al-Islam al-Aam wal-Islam al-Khas. And write in Arabic, if you can write in Arabic, it's better always. So Al-Islam al-Aam, general Islam, meaning Al-Istislam lillahi bit-Tawheed. Meaning Al-Islam lillahi bit-Tawheed. So, was Nuh alayhi salam a Muslim? Was he upon Al-Islam? Was Ibrahim, Musa, Isa, were they Muslims? Were they upon Al-Islam? Yes, they were. How were they upon Islam and the Prophet was the first Muslim? Meaning Al-Islam al-Aam, meaning Al-Istislam lillahi bit-Tawheed. What did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say regarding Ibrahim alayhi salam? Ma kana Ibrahimu Yahudiyan wala Nasraniyan walakin kana Hanif al-Muslim wa kana min al-Mushrikeen. He was not Yahudi Nasr, but he was a Muslim, Mustaslim, a person submitted to Allah upon At-Tawheed. Then the specific meaning of Islam, Al-Islam al-Khas, is the Sharia of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The Sharia of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Al-Yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum, on this day I have perfected for you your religion. Wa atmamtu alaykum ni'mati, and completed my favor upon you. Wa raditu lakum al-Islam deena, and I am pleased with Islam as being your deen, meaning the Sharia which has been revealed in the Qur'an to Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, which has abrogated the Sharia of Isa and Musa and Ibrahim and those who came before. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Inna deena indallahi al-Islam, or وَمَنْ يَبْتَغِي غَيْرِ الْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا فَلَنْ يُقْبَلَ مِنْهُ, whoever follows a deen other than Islam, it will not be accepted from Allah. It has both meanings. Firstly, whoever accepts a way other than al-istislamu lillahi bit-tawheed, complete submission to Allah with tawheed, it is not accepted from him. And it also means whoever accepts a deen other than the Sharia of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, it will not be accepted from him. Now, and the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, لو كان موسى حيا ما وسعه إلا اتباعي, that if Musa alayhi salam was alive today, then he would have to follow my Sharia. Isa alayhi salam, when he comes at the end of times, whose Sharia will he implement? Sharia to Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He will not come to implement his own Sharia, because the Sharia of Islam has abrogated the previous Sharia. So both meanings are mentioned. Tafadhal akhi, what do you have a question?
What did you say the definition of Islam al-Aam was?
Al-Istislam lillahi bil-Tawheed wal-inqadu lahu bil-ta'a wal-bara'atu min ash-shirki wa ahlihi. So all of the messengers were Muslims. So for example, and the people ask, they often ask this question, the ayah in the Qur'an, what's the ayah in the Qur'an? إن الذين آمنوا والذين هادوا والنصارى والصابئين من آمن بالله واليوم الآخر. Verily, those who have Iman and الذين هادوا, i.e. the Yahud, and the Christians, والصابئين, those who have Iman in Allah amongst them, they will enter into Jannah, and the end of the ayah. Does that mean now the Yahud and the Nasara enter into Jannah? No, the Muslims amongst the Yahud and the Nasara. The Muslims amongst the Yahud and Nasara, with the general meaning of Al-Islam. Then the author mentioned, and we'll finish with this, now he begins mentioning the evidence for every single one of these 5 pillars. So he's going to mention the evidence of Shahada, and the evidence for Salah, and Zakah, and Sawm, and Al-Hajj. Why? Because you have to worship Allah knowing the evidences. So he said, وَدَلِيلُ الشَّهَادَةِ شهد الله أنه لا إله إلا هو والملائكة وأولو العلم قائم بالقسط لا إله إلا هو العزيز الحكيم. Allah bears witness, La ilaha illahu, and the angels and the people of knowledge. قائما بالقسط, who are upright upon justice. لا إله إلا هو العزيز الحكيم. Shahadatu an la ilaha illallah and Muhammad Rasulullah is actually one shahada, it's one pillar. Because when the Prophet ﷺ mentioned the 5 pillars of Islam, the first one he said Shahadatu an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. So it's actually one pillar. However, why do we call them shahadatan? 2 shahadas. Because these 2 shahadatan or shahadatain, they are the 2 conditions of actions. Yani, when is an ibadah valid? If it's based upon La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. When is an ibadah valid? If it's done sincerely for the sake of Allah and following the sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Al-ikhlas wal-ittiba'. So there are 2 shahadatan, however it is a single pillar. If somebody accepts La ilaha illallah and does not accept Muhammad Rasulullah, he cannot be a Muslim. If a Christian comes along and he says that I am a Unitarian, I am not a Trinitarian, meaning I don't accept the Trinity, I believe in one God. And I believe He's a Supreme Creator, and I do not believe that Jesus is Son and the Holy Spirit. I believe in only one Creator. And I believe in Jannah, and I believe in Jahannam, and I believe in the Torah and the Injil and the Qur'an. I believe all of this is complete revelation. And I am going to follow Isa alayhi salam, and he does follow Isa alayhi salam. Unless he does follow Isa alayhi salam. Is he a Muslim? No. He has to say, I also bear witness and I follow Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Now, so this is why there are 2 shahadatin, but it is a single pillar. The ulama say regarding this ayah, Shahid Allahu annahu la ilaha illahu, that this shows the virtue of La ilaha illallah and the scholars of At-Tawheed. Why? Because look whom Allah mentioned them along with. He mentioned the ulama of Tawheed along with the angels and along with himself. He says, Shahid Allah annahu la ilaha illallah wal malaika wa ulul ilm. Allah bears witness, and the angels bear witness, and the scholars, the people of Tawheed, bear witness. So this ayah shows us the virtue of the scholars who call to At-Tawheed. Also, it shows us the virtue of calling to Tawheed. It shows the fadl of the da'wah of Tawheed. Because who calls to it? Allah and the angels and the scholars of At-Tawheed. So it shows us the virtue of the people of knowledge, and it shows us the virtue of the call of At-Tawheed. And then the author mentions the meaning of La ilaha illallah. What is its meaning? La ma'buda bihaqqin illallah. None has the right to ibadah except Allah. La ma'buda bihaqqin illallah. None has the right to ibadah except Allah. This is why when we define La ilaha illallah, we don't say there is no God except Allah, there is no creator besides Allah. We say none has the right to ibadah except Allah. None has the right to worship except Allah. There is no God, there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah. And La ilaha illallah, it is made of 2 pillars. La ilaha illallah. We mentioned previously, an-nafi wal-ithbat, negating and affirming. So you have to negate the false deities, and then you have to affirm the right of Allah to worship. You have to negate the right of anybody else besides Allah to ibadah, and then you have to affirm the right of Allah to al-ibadah. So if a person says that I am going to worship Allah upon Tawheed, but I will not reject the Hindus and the Nasara and the Yahud worshipping their creator. Each one is open to worship his own creator. You say this is kufr, this is not al-Islam. You have to affirm the right of Allah. You have to negate the worship of all other deities. He said, La ilaha nafin jami'a ma yu'badu min dunillah, negating everything which is worshipped besides Allah. Illallah, except Allah, meaning affirming the worship of Allah alone, who has no sharik in his ibadah. Just as he has no partner in his mulk and his khalq and his rizq, then he has no sharik in his ibadah. Why? لأن توحيد الربوبية يستلزم توحيد الألوهية. So if you affirm that Allah has no partner in his khalq and his creation and his mulk, in his dominion and his rizq, then you have to affirm that nobody else has a right in worship as well. لأن توحيد الربوبية يستلزم Tawheed al-Uluhiyya. And what's the evidence that La ilaha illallah is these two pillars, an-nafi wal-ithbat? The saying of Allah, وَإِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ لِأَبِيهِ وَقَوْمِهِ إِنَّنِي بَرَاءٌ مِمَّا تَعْبُدُونَ إِلَّا الَّذِي فَطَرَنِي. When Ibrahim said to his father and his people, verily I free myself from that which you worship. La ilaha, an-nafi. إِلَّا الَّذِي فَطَرَنِي, except for the one who created me. إِلَّا اللَّهِ, al-ithbat. And the saying of Allah, قُلْ يَا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ تعالوا إلى كلمة سواء بيننا وبينكم ألا نعبد إلا الله ولا نشرك به شيئا. That we only worship Allah alone, al-ithbat. ولا نشرك, النفي, negating. And the saying of Allah, فَمَنْ يَكْفُرْ بِالطَّاغُوتِ وَيُؤْمِنْ بِاللَّهِ. Whoever rejects and negates the false deities, النفي, لا إله. وَيُؤْمِنْ بِاللَّهِ, and has iman Allah, illallah, al-ithbat, affirming the worship of Allah. And the meaning of shahada is أعترف ناطقا بلساني معتقدا بقلبي. Shahada meaning, ashhadu meaning, I affirm by professing upon my tongue that which I believe in my heart. Now, I affirm La ilaha illallah because I believe it on my heart and I am professing upon my tongue. This is why when a person wants to accept Islam, we don't say it's enough for you to believe. We say you have to verbalize. So say after me, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, to the end of the shahadatain. So Ashhadu means I believe and I profess upon the tongue. And then after this he mentions Shahadatu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah and its evidence. And he said the meaning of the second Shahada is Ta'atuhu fima amar, obeying the messenger what he commanded, wa tasdiquhu fima akhbar, and affirming believing what he informed, wa ijtinabu ma naha anhu wa zajar, and staying away from that which he forbade, wa alla yu'bad Allah illa bima shara, that Allah is not worshipped except in what the Messenger ﷺ legislated. And then he mentioned the evidence for Salah and Az-Zakah, and the evidence of As-Siyam, and the evidence of Al-Hajj. Now, why? So now that you have read the evidences, now you can answer the question in the grave. Because now you believe it according to the evidences, not because of culture. And then after this, the second pillar, which is Al-Iman, which we will study in the second lesson. We suffice with that. هذا والله أعلم وصلى الله على نبينا وسلم. If there's any questions, welcome to ask your question. No questions?
When you read in the Quran and the name of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam for dog, I say like if you're in prayer and you're reading it, should you say sallallahu alaihi wasallam after it?
No, because take this as a fa'idah. The Quran is stated with three different intentions. The Quran is said or stated with three different objectives. The Quran is said either tilawatan or istishhadan or du'a'an. The Quran is said either as a form of tilawa or it's said as a form of istishhad, meaning an evidence. You're explaining an evidence. Or it's said as a form of dua. طيب? So if you're reciting the Quran tilawatan, like we do in our salah, like a question, or when we read the Quran, we're not saying it as a dua, and we're not saying it as an evidence, we're just reciting it. Now when you recite it with the tune, with melody, etc., in your salah, for example, then you don't need to mention sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Secondly, you cannot recite the Quran tilawatan if you're in a state of janaba. If you're in a state of major impurity, then you cannot recite the Quran tilawatan. Thirdly, you cannot recite the Quran tilawatan in certain situations. So for example, in the sujood, there's no recitation of the Quran. In the ruku', there's no recitation of the Quran. In the graveyards, there's no recitation of the Quran, tilawatan, as a form of tilawa. Now, tilawa meaning you're reciting the Quran to seek closeness to Allah and as a form of ibadah. And all the rules apply. It has to be recited with tajweed. And the Messenger ﷺ said, "Man lam yataghanna bil Qur'an falaysa minna." Whoever does not recite the Quran melodiously is not from us. And you don't say the Quran, you make tilawa of the Quran. Naam. Yatluna Allahi haqqa tilawatihi. They make tilawa of the Quran as it should be made tilawa of. And the hadith, zayyinu aswatakum bil Quran. Beautify your voices with the Quran. This is tilawa. طيب. Then you recite the Quran istishhadan. Istishhadan means like I've been doing today. So when I've been talking, I mentioned Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said this, its evidence is this. When the khatib mentions the ayat, he's not saying them as a form of tilawa, but in order to istishhad as an evidence. There you can say sallallahu alayhi wasallam when you're explaining it or after it, because when you're making tilawa, you're reciting the Quran as it has been revealed. Naam. When you recite the Quran istishhadan, then you mention it as a form of evidence and you're explaining it as you go along. Naam. So there's nothing wrong with saying sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And so that statement of the Quran does not have to be with tilawa. It does not have to be with taghanni, wal tazyin, beautifying the voice. It does not have to be with the ahkam of tajweed, like the mudud and the ghunna. It doesn't have to be with that. Then you come to recite the Quran as a form of dua. And when you recite it in the form of dua, you don't have to be upon wudu, and you can even say it upon janaba, and it can be said in the sujood, for example. Why? Because you're not saying those ayat as tilawa, but you're saying them as a dua. It can be said in the graveyard. So for example, we know you can't recite the Quran in the graveyard. Can you say Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana? You make dua for the person in the grave. And you make dua for yourself, oh Allah, forgive him and forgive me. And then you say Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana, which is an ayah in the Quran. Is that allowed? Yes. Why? Because this is dua and this is not a tilawa. Fahmt? No.
Just to follow on from the question, when a lecturer is using an ayah while giving the lecture, is it more rewarding if they was to present that with a melodious voice, or would it be better just to say it normally?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Allahu a'lam. I've heard some ulama criticize the melodious recitation of the Quran with the rules of tajweed when it said istishhadan. And I've heard other ulama saying that there's no problem in it. So Allah knows best. But if it's tilawa of the Quran, without doubt.
Yeah, my question was, if you're late to a lecture, is it good manners to say salam or just sit down quietly?
Some of the ulama, they mention that it's from bad etiquette to say the salam because it disturbs other people, and it disturbs the people. But then also there's a hadith of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam when the Sahaba was sitting and they were making dhikr of Allah, and the Prophet came upon them and he said salam to them. So, and you look at it, depends. You look at the situation, it depends. If you said it quietly and you sat down, Allahu a'lam. طيب, we suffice with that. جزاكم الله خير.